So you said that you and Cub were close?
Yeah, he was incorporate he was part of my business. Like we got close really fast. I only knew him for about a year. We have this crew called the Cuts Crew. It's a graffiti crew, but it's focused on community service. So normally graffiti crews are a crew of people that just get together and they do graffiti together. That's a very short and basic description. There's more to it than that, obviously, but so we wanted to, like I was saying earlier, this whole being a positive role model to the graffiti culture. We also started this crew, and so we do like cleanups and those alleys where there's like a bunch of mattresses and dressers and people just dump all kinds of shit. So we'll go and clean up that alley and do a nice positive mural. So cut stands for clean up the streets. And so he had approached me and said, "Hey, I'm interested in joining that." And we became friends after that. And he started working for my company. I have a studio. It's a whole like community type of thing where we let people come in and draw. We have art shows and we provide like a safe legal venue for any graffiti writers, but it was typically directed at the youngsters, like at-risk youth or underserved areas and things like that. I'm kind of rambling, so I kind of wanted to talk to you more.
You're you're fine. No, this is a conversation, and your audience is going to enjoy hearing this part,
Yeah.
right? They're going to having that origin story, why this is important for the people that are listening. I've known Mike for a little while. We've been in mutual groups, but him reaching out and telling me about Cub and about you guys wanting to speak about adversity. I have a lot of people vying for my attention, but that really got my attention. And then I like your message and I like your truth. You don't have bullshit out there. And there's a lot of that. So that's why I wanted to get on here. And he gave me the invite yesterday and I clicked on it today to get it done. So that's when you decide you want to do something, you act on it. You don't wait. You don't push it off. Because as we know, we don't know how long we have. We don't know how much time or energy we have to the things that are important. So that's why we're
Yeah.
talking about this. Yeah.
Well, I was really excited, man, because I sent you the message and I hate this term imposter syndrome, like it just sort of bothers me, but like I kind of feel that all the time. Like as a podcaster, quote, we just wanted to do this thing to try to help people. It's directed at the graffiti culture, but it's not about graffiti. The
Right.
podcast was never about graffiti. So we get, some people saying, "Oh, you got to talk about this and that," chase stories or whatever. But that's not really what we're trying to do. And so what I kind of wanted to talk about briefly was, you know, what we did originally and what I've continued to do is I read all the time and we're finding information that's life changing or, at least very beneficial. And so what I was doing and what we were doing was taking that information and trying to frame it and give it to the graffiti culture. We're not out here trying to be like gurus and we know all this shit. It's like I read this, it helped me, maybe it'll help you. Here's the information. So what was so exciting about having you interested in being on this is the first time that we're going to get that information that I found life changing directly from the source. So Marcus is he's a speaker. He's got a book called The Gift of Adversity. He's got a great podcast, Octa Non Verba. I was even listening to you when you were on the Conscious Millionaire. Did I get that title right? That was a while
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. It was called Epic Achiever. I was doing that
Epic
with
Achiever, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I've talked about you on this show before, and I've mentioned some things that I've learned from you. So I'm just super excited that you're here because I think it's just going to be so cool to, it's one thing for me to read the shit or listen to it and be like, "Hey guys, I learned this, check it out." But now you get to tell us this stuff. So there's a couple things I would like to talk to you about, but would you be interested in telling the story on how you kind of came about this gift of adversity? What do you call it? A concept, a mindset? What?
All of
What's
the
the?
above, none of the
Yeah,
above,
yeah,
whatever resonates with people. Man, it's a lifelong journey. I'm 50 now, and you were talking about how, you read something. For me, Stephen Pressfield, I'm sure that you know Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art.
Yeah, I've read that a couple times.
Yeah, and if you're listening to us now, that this means you're a creative, this means you're an artist. And The War of Art by Pressfield says, break through the blocks to win your own creative battles. So to me, that can be an author, which obviously Pressfield is. He's very prolific, but it could be an artist in any capacity, whether it be a musician, no matter what the medium or materials that they use to express themselves. That's why it's important. And it's important for us to understand that adversity is everywhere. It's omnipresent. It's part of just the universal code. If you are a human being, you will absolutely face it. And even if you don't feel like you're facing it right now, the adversity that you may be facing is mediocrity, because you're just there. You're doing just enough to get by. You're not in enough pain to change, but you have just enough pleasure to be satiated, not try to find more or push yourself or ask for more. So with cuts, doing that with your group, that's fantastic. Maybe your crew can say, listen, we have a goal for in the next 2 months to get 6 of these done. And now what's that force us to do? Change our style, change our ability to produce at mass, change our capacity to really find what's a vision, what's something worth saying, as opposed to having a bunch of superfluous pamphlets out there, which I don't think that's what you guys are doing, but I'm sure that there are people that are sort of doing that kind of false positivity out there. In my book, The Gift of Adversity, and my TEDx, The Gift of Adversity, I've done martial arts since I was, 11 or 12. I started trying to read philosophy at a young age. Having a name like Marcus Aurelius, it's impossible to really live up to that. But my grandfather named me that because he knew. My grandfather found out that I was born on the same birthday of his. And he also knew at that time that he was dying. Now he's talking to my father on the phone. My dad calls him and says, "Hey, happy birthday, Dad. The gift to you is your grandchild." And he says, "I want you to name him." He named me that because he knew that he was going to be dying soon. And he knew that he wasn't going to get to live to see me grow up. But his intention was to give me something to have for the rest of my life, to endeavor towards, to be worthy of, or at least to seek that sort of mentality. And so that was the best gift that I could have got from him, even though I didn't get to spend much time with him. Fast forward more to the specifics. When I was 38, I was in chiropractic school in Atlanta, Georgia. I was married and I was trying to figure out, I'm bartending at the time. So I'm bartending 40 hours a week. I'm taking 25 hours of doctorate level courses, and I'm just like spread thin. And because I wasn't prioritizing the right things, my marriage fell apart. And so right after that, my great uncle, who was my biggest male role model outside of my father, who was in Vietnam, Special Forces, Recon, Green Berets, he passed away. So at 38, I'm divorced. I have no money. And then my great uncle passes, and it makes me really look at my life and say, why the fuck am I killing myself to do this thing that I realized at that point I was doing for other people? But I kept doing what everybody else does, which is, well, I'm already this far into it, the whole sunk cost fallacy. So I'm just going to finish it and get it done. And then when I get out, I'll be able to, hang a shingle and practice and serve my community and finally get out of some of this debt. At that point, after I was the pallbearer for my great uncle's funeral, I was pretty stoic during the ceremony. But then once they started playing taps and they folded the flag and they gave it to my great aunt, and I'm sitting next to her, and they say, "Thank you for your sacrifice. We're sorry for your loss." I just fell apart. And I'm supposed to be here taking care of my great aunt, trying to be strong for her. And I'm just a blubbering mess. That week I go down and say, talk to a recruiter, because there's probably something that everybody wants to do in their life right now. Stephen Pressfield, in this book, The War of Art, he says, each of us have 2 lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. Between those lives lies resistance. So he capitalizes resistance with a capital R because he feels it as this entity, this force, this barrier from greatness. He's the reason why I capitalize adversity, because I feel that adversity is the same thing. Resistance is anything that stops us from trying to become better, from trying to push, from trying to improve ourselves or those around us. To me, resistance is the same thing as adversity, but to me, adversity is a much more adversarial, much more nefarious, much more deadly form of resistance. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But at 38, I was like, I've always wanted to try to join the military, but I always had an excuse not to because I'm married. My wife doesn't want me to do that, or school won't let me do that. And I went and talked to the recruiter at 38 and asked him if I could get in. He asked me how old I was, and he told me the age limit at that time was 35. But he asked me about my motivation. And I told him kind of what I told you. And he said, well, are you smart? I'm like, well, I'm talking to a recruiter at 38 years old. Do I sound smart to you? But what he meant was, how would I do on an ASVAB? And having a doctorate level course of study, I did well on the ASVAB. And then my PT test for my age group, I maxed it out. So he says, listen, in the Army, if you have good test scores on either one of these, you can do different things. He says, but you've done great on both of these. You can literally choose any job that you want in the Army, and I'll sign a release right now to get you in because 38 is the absolute maximum. And I was like, I already know what I want to do. And I told him the infantry because I wanted to follow my great uncle's footsteps. And he's like, okay, well, we'll send you to OCS, which is Officer Candidate School, because I already had a degree in human biology. I was like, would I be guaranteed to get into special forces? He's like, no. He says, as a matter of fact, you would be on the lowest percentile to get in because of your age. And, these are PT studs and there's very competitive. I said, well, what if I went in as an enlisted man? Would I get an opportunity to do that then? He's like, well, you have a better chance to drop a special forces packet, but you're 38 years old. He's like, why are you trying to do that as an enlisted person? And he tried to talk me out of it, show me all these other ideas. And I was like, listen, this is what I want. And if I don't get this, then I'm just going to walk out the door. After about half an hour, finally, he just signed the release and slid it over to me. And he's like, hey, man, it's your life. And then 6 months later, I'm getting out the bus at Fort Benning, competing against guys half my age, getting yelled at guys that are younger than me. But that was the full immersion. You got to jump all the way in. There's one level of commitment, and that's total. And if you think that it's anywhere in between, then you will live a lot of mediocrity in your life. So got through infantry school, didn't break, didn't get broken, wasn't hurt, wasn't recycled. Got to 10th Mountain, which is in upstate New York. 10th Mountain Light Infantry at that time was the most deployed unit in the history of the military. Lots of regalia, lots of history. And as we were preparing to deploy that year, I kept having a lot of numbness in my hands and my feet. And for those of you that don't know, Fort Drum is 20 miles south of the Canadian border. So it's constantly cold. The winters are very, very brutal, -20 degrees. You have the mountain effect from the mountains. You have the lake effect from Lake Ontario. So it's continual precipitation, lots of rain, lots of snow, lots of ice, lots of misery. But that's what we were trained for. And because of in the war in Afghanistan, with a unit like ours, because we had mountain warfare experience, because we were an airborne unit, they could drop us off anywhere pretty much in Afghanistan in the mountains and say, here's your entry point. The target's, 15 meters, 15 clicks from here. You guys go assault through and go take that. That's what we were training to do. But as the training went on, I was having trouble feeling with my hands. I was having trouble holding onto the pull-up bar when we would do PT exercise outside. When I was trying to run, my feet weren't really moving the way that they should. And eventually one morning I tried to roll out of bed after we'd been training for weeks out, in the field, and my neck would move, but my body wouldn't articulate. So the chiropractor in me tells me that this is a neurological, incident, but I just thought I kind of laughed it off. I was like, oh, the old man's tired, because at this point I'm 39. I'm getting close to 40. And it doesn't get any better. And that's when I start to realize this is something serious. Now, luckily they were going to knock on my door soon anyway for an AAR, an after action report, about the training that we had done, because at that point I'd been given a team. So as a team leader, and when they knock on the door, I yell, and they're like, I tell them that I can't move. And I'm not the kind of guy that would, play around with that. And so they knock down the door and they take me to the hospital. And that's when I start really having to take a good hard look at my own mortality, my own physicality, and what does this mean to me? They get there, to do an MRI. I've got a ruptured disc in my neck at C5, between C5 and C6. For those of you that remember who Christopher Reeve is, that was the nerve root level where he was paralyzed from the neck down as well. And he never recovered. So they get me ready for operation. I go under, I flatline on the table twice, and I come back in the ICU, and I'm confused. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm still paralyzed at that point. And they had me in a neck brace too at that point. So now what little movement I did have is taken from me. And they got me all strung out on morphine and shit. So finally, when the doctor comes in the next day and I'm kind of, lucid, he tells me, he says the good news is you get to live to tale. We lost you a couple of times. The bad news is this is what you're left with. And so a couple of days later, I turned 40. So I'm in that bed. And when everybody else is 40, they're looking back on their life and their family and their homes and their picket fence and their 2 cars and all that stuff that is the American dream. And I'm looking back at my failed life in my mind. And I'm broke, divorced, bedridden, paralyzed, 40 years old. The only thing I'd ever committed to in a lot of ways was the military, to reinvent myself. And now that's been taken from me. Not only that, but the physicality that I'd taken for granted my entire life had been taken from me. So if you're listening to me right now, everybody says, well, I know that we're going to die. And I get that. But there's a fate worse than death. And the fate worse than death is the regret that you live with, knowing that for me, I may have an additional 40 years of my life after that, but I would have to be completely dependent on somebody else. I would have no physical independence. So if you're listening to me right now, I want you to ask yourself, if you woke up tomorrow paralyzed from the neck down, what do you wish you would have accomplished with your life? And these are the kind of questions that we have to ask ourselves to really reflect, to see what the fuck matters to us. Because for us in society, people, society, culture will try to give priorities to you. But if everything is a priority for you, then nothing is a priority. And you'll spend your entire life spinning your wheels trying to make other people happy or impress them, when in the reality of it, it doesn't fucking matter. What matters is who you are, how you feel about what you've created, what you've produced, the journey that you've gone on to get to that place. Because if you're going out trying to find validation from other people, you will never find that validation or accommodation or recognition until you no longer care about it. Until you've done something that means something to you, that's significant, that's powerful, that creates an impact on others. And once you're doing that kind of work and you stop worrying about all the superfluous bullshit around you, that's when you will start to make work that really matters. Everybody talks about influencing, or you and I were discussing influencers, people that buy a bunch of fake followers and bullshit on social media. If you want to influence people, create impact. Write something that's powerful. Bleed onto the fucking page. When you're painting, do the same thing when you're doing graffiti. Make it something that is a part of you. If it has the right kind of substance to it, it will evoke the same emotion within somebody that beholds it. And they'll say, I understand what that is. I can feel what they're feeling. I know what they're doing. I've been there. They understand me. I understand them. This is the power of the creative process, no matter what the medium is, whether it be music, art, writing. And this is why we talk about adversity, right? You were talking about Cub wanting to talk about adversity. Adversity is one of the most powerful creative forces in the world if you're able to channel it properly and filter it through something that means something to you. And that's what we're trying to talk about here. When I was learning to play the guitar, the music that really resonated me was the stuff that was very dark, minor keys. I can't think of a musician that doesn't have the most power when they're happy, but when they're going through hell, when they're tortured, when they're crying and they can barely get through that song, that's what I want to fucking hear. I don't need platitudes. I don't need a bunch of people give me a bunch of bubblegum, easily, edited stuff. That doesn't mean anything to me. That's a waste of time. There's no teeth in that. There's no soul in that. And the thing is, Stephen Pressfield said that he was an abject failure for 30 years. So he failed over and over and over again, but writing something that meant something was something that he could never get rid of. He would have to exercise it by actually doing it. And so if you're in the creative process now, it's a journey, and feeling lost on the path is part of your path. When I was learning to play the guitar, I wanted to sound like Eddie Van Halen or Jimmy Page or Jimi Hendrix or Randy Rhoads. This shows you how old I am. But in the process of trying to get to their technical level, I couldn't get there. I failed a lot. But in the attempt of greatness, of trying to imitate what they sounded like, I was able to find things that to me were unique, that I'd never heard before. And then, like a Venn diagram, the failure in me trying to sound like this person mixed with the other failure of me trying to sound like this other person, when I melded them together, it was sort of different, and I never heard it before. And then I started slowly beginning to develop my own voice, my own style. It was the same thing with writing. There's some writing that I did probably 10 years ago that you would say, oh, did Robert Greene write that? Or did Stephen Pressfield write that? Because I was probably very influenced by them at that point, which is fine. It's not a bad thing to have influence. Don't try to be that guy that's like, oh, I'm not influenced by anybody, because unless you were completely deaf, dumb, and blind, you've been influenced by somebody, even if you can't put your finger on it. But this is why it's so important to understand the power of that adversity. Adversity crushes us if we're not exposed to it enough, if we don't know how to ride it like a wave. But if we can learn to embrace it and see that it's trying to show us where we're weak, it's showing us the gaps, it shows us the glaring weaknesses and all the things that we should be improving on. And we do one of two things when it faces us. Either we realize it, we take the lesson and we try to improve, or we shy away from it. Because human beings, the reality is we want to get as far away from hardship as we can when it hurts, whether it be a relationship, whether it be a stove that we touch when we're a child that's hot. We want to try to create that gap away from it. For me, when I was injured, I didn't have that. When I was paralyzed for months, I wanted to commit suicide, and I couldn't even act on that. So now, for no other reason, I was forced to sit there with the adversity, with this open wound, in the proximity to it, and now look at it and say, what the fuck's in here? What do I have? What have I been running from this whole time? What am I not looking at? What am I acting like I don't know? That's abundantly obvious to me and everyone around me. So if you can look at your hardship as your adversity, as this wound, as something sacred, as an opportunity to learn, even though it's tough, that will be when you learn the most. So whether it be failure at attempting a technique, or whether it be failure in a relationship, there's a lesson there. And we have to shift our mentality and our mindset about that. We have to do the cognitive reframe and say, there's an event, and the event is neutral. It's like if I drop a pin, it just falls. There's no intention behind it. The event doesn't mean anything until I assign meaning to it. Whatever I assign to that meaning evokes emotion, and then that emotion creates thoughts, potentially actions. But lots of times, if we can choose to take the courageous decision and frame whatever's happening to us as something, as an opportunity to learn, as a litmus test, as something that will push us to get better without breaking, that's when you can get much better in any area. But in today's society, it's very easy to be artificially pacified. T.S. Eliot says we are distracted by distraction by more distraction. And if you live in today's society, Mike, you and I are old enough to have grown up without internet, without a cell phone attached to our hand. And I think that's a blessing with the last generation to have that opportunity. So if I go for a run or go for a walk or meditate, I could put that phone down, put on airplane mode, have no input in my ears, and just be present and figure out what the hell is going on in my own head, or not even figure it out, just let it unwind, let it unravel, and let all that bullshit fall away. And that's when we're able to kind of tap into that creative voice, tap into, Stephen Pressfield calls it the muse. It's that thing above us. It's a beyond resistance when we're able to defeat it. And that's kind of what I want everybody to understand. If you're listening to us right now, it's because you want to get better. You want to be a better creative, but more importantly, you want to be better at things that mean the most to you. So if you're confused or distraught or even depressed, man, that's talking to you for a reason. It means that your thoughts and your actions and your beliefs are not aligned. And if that's the case, then you need to step back and say, what the hell's going on? And how much longer am I going to allow this to confuse me? And it's tough sometimes if you're around family members that tell you to be realistic and to stop, painting and doing the stupid bullshit or whatever they're saying. You have to understand that their path is not yours, and that's okay. Lots of the people that we have are not really our friends. They're mostly people that are kind of based on proximity, which is why a lot of people like to get away from their hometown and they move to Vegas or New York or LA or wherever it is where they can reinvent themselves, be around like-minded people to help push them. In the process of doing that, sometimes we fall behind this idea of desperation, though, of resistance, of adversity. And then we start making compromise decisions that don't serve us, that take us further away from the path that we're trying to go on. So understand that we have to continually re-tap into whatever that is within us, that creative energy, whether it be the inspiration of an artist, whether it be living for the memory of Cub. Everything that we do has gravity, if we so choose. And if that's the case, then every fucking decision that we make from here on out is important, whether it be what I put into my body, what I allowed into my mind, what I eat, what I don't eat, when I exercise, when I don't, all these things, everything is contingent on that. And if you do that, you will have a lot more urgency in everything that you do. You start to ask yourself, is this really what I want to do? And if it's not, why am I doing it? Or how can I get less of that in my life to focus on the things that really matter? And for most people, the only way to find that is to hit rock bottom. And for most people, that rock bottom is some form of adversity, whether it be financial, what happened in 2020, right? A lot of people went through financial difficulties there. It could be a cancer diagnosis to themselves or a loved one. It could be a car accident. It could be anything. And we have to understand that. And the more that you can take that into consideration now, not let it freeze you. I don't want you to be paralyzed with indecision, but I also don't want you to be on a path that is obviously not yours, and then thinking that you have to keep doing it, hoping that it will somehow lead you to where you want to go.
That's such powerful stuff, man. There's like so many questions. Man.
And I rambled. I'm sorry. So
no, it's fine. I was just listening. I'm like, holy shit, man. I hope this guy just keeps talking because I don't know, I don't know what I'm going to say, to be honest. But yeah, there's so much there. I mean, the learning from mistakes or how what you were talking about with the guitar and influence, like I love that so much because, we talk about this in graffiti sometimes where there's this term biting and you're not supposed to, I guess, steal things from other people, which is, you can't do that deliberately. But what you're talking about is you're influenced no matter what, and being able to find your own voice in the middle of those two influences that you were talking about. I mean, I think that's so interesting because most people won't admit that, they won't admit that that's where their style came from or where their, anything came from, really. I mean, their style or their voice or all that stuff. So I thought that was super interesting. But also, there's something that I really liked what you said and something that I learned a lot from you that I use almost daily, and I might misquote you, so feel free to correct me, but you said something on your podcast where you said, I think I got this right. You said like most people do this like easy bullshit gratitude. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I took your meaning, and I think you explained it. I'm sorry, my memory is kind of whatever, but you should be grateful for all of your adversities and all of your mistakes and all of this stuff. And it's been so helpful for me to use because, I'm generally, I don't want to say unhappy, but just a generally stressed out, worried kind of person. Like that's just something I'm trying to correct about myself. And that practice, while it's so simple, like I would go outside and stand in the sun and just think like I'm grateful for whatever it is that I'm stressed about. Like when I was trying to create systems in my business a couple of years ago, like we had systems, but they weren't written down. And in the first Arate call that I was on, Andy was like, you got to get your systems down. It was right when the pandemic was really starting. And so I was like, oh shit. Well, how do I do this? And it was so stressful because we were several years in. I don't want to make this about business, but we were so far in that there was like a lot of backtracking that we had to do. And I was completely overwhelmed, like all the time. All day long, I would be thinking about this, and then I would dream about it, and I'd wake up in 3 o'clock in the morning thinking about it. And then when I heard you say that, I was like, fuck, man, this guy's got something really powerful here. So I would go outside and I'd say, I'm grateful for all of this that I'm feeling right now, and for all of this. I don't know if that's adversity. I guess it is,
It
you know,
is.
and, you know, instantly I would start to feel better about it. I mean, obviously, like that stuff creeps back in because you have to remind yourself to use these tools that you have, this stuff just creeps back in. But every time I would use that practice, that exact being grateful for whatever this is that I'm going through. And when we opened our second location in Vegas, it was the same shit. It was super overwhelming. I was spending all this money. There was all this downtime. We couldn't find a place. It was just, I was like, I'm so fucking stressed out right now. But I would go outside and I'd be like, I'm grateful for this because there's going to be something on the other side that I would not have gotten to had I not gone through this. So I've told our listeners about that exact lesson before, but I just, I wanted to bring that up to you because it was just, I use it almost every day, from listening to I don't remember who you were talking to. And I think I've heard you say it a couple times probably, but, how did you, was it your injury and is that how you came to that, being grateful for the adversity? Cause I remember when I heard your story, I'm a little out of breath. I was like kind of going,
No, I like it. I like it.
When I heard your story, you found small ways to be grateful. Like, what was it? You could wiggle your toe or something.
So you're absolutely right. And I'll talk about the gratitude, but that's exactly what adversity is. Adversity is a privilege. There's a lot of people that would kill to have the opportunity to say, holy shit, I have my second location. And now I had this horrible problem of figuring out SOPs and employees and protocols. It's like, no, there's going to be adversity in our life, no matter what it is. And we get to choose. Is it going to be the adversity of opening your fourth and fifth location 3 or 4 years from now? Or is it going to be the adversity of, God damn it, I don't have enough money to make rent. I can't find, a place to really do what I want to do because I haven't endured So what I did in my life was I kept kicking adversity down the road and hoping that I could just deal with it later. But because I chose to look at it longer down the road, adversity doesn't get better with age. It gets bigger, it gets worse. So you have to get in front of it as soon as you can, which is what you were doing whenever Andy made that call. And you're like, man, I have to write this down. I have to create a checklist. I have to create protocols to where I can give it to anybody and they can work on this. That's why it's important to be able to truly scale, right? You're decentralizing command, like Jocko Willink would say. Adversity, I say in my TEDx, is adversity forces you to drop everything else you're doing to give it your full undivided attention. It shows up unannounced at the most inopportune time without apology. Adversity couldn't care less about what you want. It doesn't give a damn about your feelings. And adversity doesn't take no for an answer. It forces you to up your game and play at a higher level and never let you coast or do just enough to get by. Adversity knows your true potential even when you do not, which is why it kicks your ass when you give less than everything that you have in the tank in that moment. So that's where you were at. Adversity will ask you many times if you want to give up, if you want to quit. I think you saw that I recently did that SealFit event, that 50-hour crucible.
I actually wanted to bring that up.
Yeah.
I have it in my notes.
Yeah. And we'll touch on that later, but that's what it is. Like adversity is that thing that makes you really see what it is. And so for me, I was in this depression for a long time. Like I wanted to give up. I wanted to die and I couldn't even do that. So I became the victim. And I was like, why is this happening to me? I'm a good person, blah, 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 blah. And it's very easy to get caught up in our own martyrdom when we're doing that. And eventually I got to a point where I realized that anger wasn't helping me at all. And I had to make a decision. I could either be angry and play the victim for the rest of my life, or I could choose to see my adversity as something different. When nothing else around you will change, you have to change you to fit what's going on around you, to change that influence. So for me, I was like, well, is there anything I can be grateful for? Anything. I kept saying no, no, no. Studying martial arts my entire life, trying to read Marcus Aurelius material at a young age. While a lot of it went over my head, the great thing about martial arts is the philosophy is built into it. It's baked into the very fabric of what you're doing. And this idea of Zen, they have this notion that they say, I want happiness is a statement. Well, I is your ego, so you cut that out. One is desire. So that's an expectation. So again, if you can get rid of that, all you have left is happiness. So if I want to be smoother as a musician, I don't say I want to be smoother. I just imagine this idea of being smooth, of this presence, and everything that I do is smooth. If I'm doing what you guys do with graffiti, it's about having this impact, about creating this shape, these figures that can align in a way that evoke an emotion from someone else, that have meaning. For me, I realized that somebody had to benefit from what happened to me, and it wasn't me. What I was grateful for was that if this had happened when I was in Afghanistan, for every one man that is injured in combat, it takes two to pull into safety. So if this had happened to me in Afghanistan, if we had been deployed at the time, that means my entire team would have been compromised, which means another team, another squad would have had to cover down to give us cover and protect us. It means a helicopter would have had to flow into a hot zone to come get us. And for those of you that don't know, a Chinook helicopter is a really big target. Like Navy SEALs have been taken out by one RPG, the most elite unit in the world, because they had to come into a hot zone to try to get somebody. So for me, I was like, wow, I'm lucky. Not that I was lucky, but I was lucky and grateful that nobody else was injured at the time. And that's all that I had. But man, when you don't have anything else and you can find one small sliver to be grateful for, that will literally change your life. And that became the cornerstone for me. That was the foundation, right? And then I was slowly able to build on that. And I was slowly able to say, I'm grateful that I have a bed. I'm grateful that I'm in a room that's dry and warm. I'm grateful that I have food. I'm grateful that these people will put up with me being an asshole right now because of the way I'm acting, because of the way I feel about myself. And when you get to the point where you're grateful for a bed that you may never leave or a room that you can't ever go out of, that's when you can really start to see what it is. Gratitude is a verb. If I'm fucking grateful for somebody, they know it. In the same way that people know that you love them without you saying it, or the same way that you can tell that somebody doesn't like you or hate you because they don't have to say anything. It's obvious. So if you're really grateful for these things, show it. If you're grateful for your employees, they'll know. If you're grateful for your customers, if you're grateful for the product that you create, they won't be able to put their finger on it, but they'll know it. It's palpable. The same thing with great graffiti, right? The same thing with great art, the same thing with great writing, the same thing with anything that's a creative endeavor that is from the human condition. That's what we're trying to do. And that's how, if we can channel adversity in that way, if we can use it to our advantage instead of against us, that's when it serves us. And when I was able to find gratitude in those small things, eventually weeks later, I was able to get a little bit of feeling back into my left hand. And like you said, it wasn't a hell of a lot, but man, when you haven't had anything for months, it's life-changing. Here's the part that I don't talk about. And Stephen Pressfield, I was lucky enough to have him on my podcast last year, and he's going to be on again next month. So I'm pretty excited about that.
That's how I learned about him, from listening on your podcast.
Dude, he's incredible. He's epic.
Yeah.
But he was bringing, I talked to him with this, but it was like, so I go to that point and finally I start getting a little bit of feeling back, feeling in my other hand, feeling in my feet. And then I started getting hubris. I started getting that arrogance, that soldier arrogance. See, if I can overcome death, I can overcome this walking thing. I'm just going to walk it off, right?
Oh, shit.
And what happened was I lost that genuine gratitude. I was starting to use bullshit gratitude, the fake gratitude, right? For those of you that aren't sure what fake gratitude is or bullshit gratitude is, these are the people that have the gratitude journals and they write down a bunch of stuff that they don't really care about or they don't believe. And it becomes toxic, false positivity. People that are using gratitude incorrectly are the ones that put their hands under their feet and just kind of sit on their hands. And the entire world is going crazy around them. And it's a whirlwind. And they're like, but I'm grateful. No, you're not. You're a victim. You're leaning into it. That person is more than a victim. They're a volunteer. They are volunteering to be in that position because if you're a victim, nothing's your fault and nothing's your responsibility. And you get to what? Focus on yourself. It is one of the biggest forms of selfishness in the world because now everything is about you. Now, when other people have a hard time, you get to be the one that tries to one up them with adversity. Oh, yeah. Well, you see how bad my life is. Like, it's not a competition, guys. So as we speak, there's people that are going through much harder things than you and I will ever face in our lives, stuff that we can't even imagine. And then there are people that are going through less adversity than what we are. We read it and we hear it. And I've actually got to talk to people that are in these positions where these are multimillionaires that are have more money than they'll ever spend in their lives. And some of them are fucking miserable because they thought money was going to be this answer. And they gave up everything to sacrifice to that God of money. And they have no relationships. All the people around them hate them. They don't even know who the fuck they are. And now that they're at this place, they're isolated. Now their marriage falls apart. Now, if they try to start dating somebody else, they don't even know if that person cares about them or their money. Their kids are strangers. Their business starts to fall apart because they have zero touch contact with it. And now they're at this pinnacle of success and they have no clue what to do. So the damnable shame of it is if they had have worked on other things parallel as they try to go up that ladder, just a little ability to say, where's the gift in this adversity? What's the opportunity? What's this fucking teaching me right now? Adversity hurts because it's trying to get your attention. It's nature's way of strengthening every living creature on this earth. So if you keep running into the same adversity over and over again, there's a pattern there. And if you don't change it, and if you don't learn from it, and if you don't evolve, you're going to be doing that same thing over and over again. And here's the other part. As we get higher up, Ed Milet, Andy Frisella and Arate, these guys tell us every week, it's like, listen, it doesn't get easier because it's just a different challenge. And that's why we have to accept adversity for what it is, accept that it will never get easier. But once you accept that it doesn't get easier, it gets easier. Because now you don't have this feeling that maybe it'll get easier in the long run, or maybe that there'll be this rest stop and you won't have to work as hard. And what'll happen is you'll become conditioned to that. So just like conditioning to run a 8-minute mile, conditioning to lift a certain amount of weight, conditioning to be able to paint properly, to do graffiti in a way that is sustainable all across that deadline, that's what you have to do. And adversity is the thing that will push you to become the catalyst for that to happen. Everything that you want is based on knowing who the fuck you are and what's important to you. And the only path to genuine self-knowledge, the only gateway to that is adversity, because it tells you who you are. It strips away all the bullshit that you're not. It doesn't buy your lies. It doesn't care about what your opinion is. And it forces you to look at the good, hard truth. And now you have a decision. Am I going to adapt, or am I just going to stay here? And most people just stay there. Don't be those people.
Man, I'm not the best at interviewing people because, like, I listen to you and I'm like, I'm trying not to be the guy that listens and tries to figure out what I'm going to say. You know what I mean? So I'm just like focused in on what you're saying. And I'm like, oh my God, there's so much good shit here. But so one thing I did think of while I was trying to make sure I was listening 100% is this concept that, okay, so if adversity is such a powerful driver in pushing you forward, then there's a great deal of value in creating adversity for yourself, right? And as far as I can tell, you do that all the time. So just so people understand, he talks about he was paralyzed, but the dude now is a fucking beast. Like, you do, what do you do these? What do you call them? Ruck runs or something? You put like 40 pounds in your backpack and shit, and the dude just runs. How many miles do you run?
I was doing 10 miles.
10. Okay, I'm not running 10 miles, you know, with fucking clouds on my feet. You know what I mean? So I'm in pretty good shape, but nothing like that. So I was hoping, I know we're kind of running out of time, so I wanted to see if you could touch on this idea, because I think it's very powerful that you create adversity for yourself. I mean, I don't know if that's the intention, because I'm not exactly sure, but if you could talk about that, because the SEAL Fit, what is it called? SEAL Fit 50?
Yeah, the SEALFIT's event was called Kokoro. It's Japanese for mind and spirit, and that's what it was. So it's hard. So here's what happens. Like I still have numbness, some numbness in my hands and my feet, but I like that because it keeps me tethered to that adversity that I came from, and it reminds me every time. So if I'm bitching and moaning about something, and it's like, but remember where you came from, and that keeps me grounded. It keeps me honest, and then I'm always seeking out adversity in some capacity. Here's what I've found: either I go seek it out, or it comes and finds me.
Oh yeah.
And when it finds me, it's usually had a lot of steam and a lot of momentum behind it. It's a lot harder to get in front of, right? So I go out and seek that motherfucker now. But the Kokoro 50 is a 50-hour event, and it's basically it's put on by Mark Devine and his SEALFIT event people. The people that were actually our cadre were active SEALs. So these are guys that are like doing it for real. And it's a 2.5-day event. The idea is to push you to a place far beyond what you thought was capable of, and it's supposed to emulate like almost half of a hell week that they give to SEALs. It's not a hell week. I'm not a SEAL. I'm not that. But just in, like you said, the 8 months training leading up to that forced me to elevate, forced me to evolve, forced me to grow. I attack these, I call them micro adversities, these smaller ones. And now that allows me to have the potential to get stronger, to the potential to be more resilient, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so that I can be ready for it. Because right now, as we speak, adversity is coming for all of us. So I can either choose to not take any steps to even have a chance to be prepared against it, or I can understand that it is coming, and I can do the best that I can to my knowledge to prepare for that. So again, I was injured when I was 40. 10 years later, I'm 50, and I was not able to get through all of that event. At 12 hours, I failed a physical timing requirement. I wasn't able to finish that iteration in the time limit, but I still didn't quit, and I still wasn't injured. And I felt like I failed the mission. And I talked to the cadre, and when they were doing the after action report and they were doing the debrief, and I apologized to them, and they were like, dude, no, like you gave everything you had every single time. It's just that we have this physical standard. If you don't hit that, if you miss this time of this, whatever it is, whether it be 2 minutes or 2 seconds, that's the standard. They shook my hand. They were like, we would love for you to come back. So again, how can I talk about adversity if I'm not willing to endure it? If I'm not willing to seek it out? And everybody's adversity is different. Again, it could be the adversity of finishing that book. It could be the adversity of figuring out what you want to do on the next cut project. It could be figuring out if you have the balls to have that difficult conversation with somebody, whether it be an employee or a loved one, or whether you have the balls to look at all the brutal self-reflection and say, man, I don't like what I see. What are you going to do about it?
Hell yeah.
And you were talking about imposter syndrome. Man, we all have it, no matter who it is. Andy, Ed, Jocko Willink, even David Goggins, right? Like his entire first part of his book was this notion of, I was doing something for everybody else. I was a fraud. I was full of shit. I didn't even believe what I was telling myself. This is part of it, but it doesn't go away. We still have to go through those things. We still have to push against those things. We still have to make ourselves really demand the most from ourselves, because if we don't, one, nobody else is going to do it for us. And two, again, when adversity shows up, if you're not willing to look at it and pay the price and see it, I look at adversity now and I just see it as an indication that I'm on the right track. When I tell people I joined the military at 38, they're like, why the fuck are you doing that? That's crazy. When I tell people I'm doing the SEAL event, why are you doing that? You're crazy.
Yeah.
I did David Goggins 4x4x48 challenge the last 2 years. And you run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. And I did it to raise money to stop human trafficking and child sex slavery and human trafficking in central Missouri. So again, it's like, it's not about me. This is a chance for me to push myself and to get better. But if I'm just doing that as a platitude to tell people, hey, look at what I'm doing, I'm a badass, you're not doing it for the right reasons. But if I can attach that to something that truly changes lives, and raise $10,000 for people that are just now escaping the 25 different types of human trafficking, yeah, I'll do that all day. So if you're in a place right now where you feel stuck and you're like, I don't know if I can do more, or I don't know, I feel like I'm burnt out, Don't ask if you can push harder. Ask yourself, am I doing this for the right fucking reasons? And that will make you realize quickly if you're doing it for other people, because now what you're trying to work on will not be sustainable. But if you are doing it for the right reasons, you can take a breath and say, okay, I can rest, but I'm not stopping. And then it'll allow you to redouble your efforts. It'll help you refocus. And a lot of times it'll help you see all the stuff around you that you can just hack away that's inessential. Bruce Lee says, I absorb what is useful, I discard what is useless, and I add what is specifically my own. That to me is the mantra for every entrepreneur, every artist, every person that's trying to lead, trying to build something. Because in the end, we don't have time to wait around for other people to tell us what to do. And frankly, the people that are trying to tell us what to do, most of the time, they do not have our best interest at heart. You have to understand, you either choose what you want in this life, or you will become the result of somebody else's choice for what your life is. And I don't want anybody that can hear us to do that.
I know we're running out of time, but I just really appreciate you coming on, man. And I am very grateful, not the bullshit kind. Like I said, I mean, when you said you were down to come on, it was, I've been thinking about this for a long time. So I just can't thank you enough for doing this. And unless people are fucking zombies, man, they're going to get a lot of good stuff out of this, you know, and apply the stuff that he's telling you. And if you want more of this kind of information, then please check out his podcast, Dr. Nonverba. It's on all the podcast platforms. Your website, Marcus Aurelius Anderson, get him on there and follow him on social and support him. Like, we may not be able to afford like his one-on-one coaching or anything, but you can, maybe you can, I don't know who you are, but, you know, you can leave comments on his posts. You can do all kinds of things to support him and, you know, and give back, since he was so gracious in giving us all this great information. So I'll put all the shit in the show notes so you can get to it easier. But thank you again, man. It's an honor to have you.
It's an honor to be here. If they want to get the book, it's on Amazon, it's on Audible, the TEDx is out there.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I want to ask you something. What would Cub have wanted to ask me on this podcast?
Oh shit. Man, that's a fucking good question. I would, you know, he wrestled with demons, you know, it's public knowledge that he relapsed. And to paint just a real quick picture, he was the most positive guy I knew. I've never met anybody like him. And I only knew him in his best 9 months of his whole life. So he had overcome all of this shit of like being the person that I knew was not who he said he used to be. And so I would think that he might ask you what are some tools that he could use, you know, because obviously there was something below the surface that I didn't fully understand, because I just never in a million years would have thought he would have relapsed. But he was going to meetings and he was explaining how important the meetings were and all these kind of things. So he was doing all the work, and his sister was on the podcast talking about this, and she said that he was doing everything he was supposed to do. So I would think that he would ask you if there was any kind of tools that you could suggest when those demons are trying to come back. Do you have anything?
Yeah, and man, it is. I've lost people to substance abuse, all kinds. You know, alcohol. Seen members on certain sides of my family just slowly commit suicide with a bottle over years, drag down everyone around them. And I'm sorry that we lost Cub in the process. Having said that, what happens is we get into situations like that where we start to forget that, like, every breath that I take, I literally have a choice of who I want to become, who I want to act like. So I did a tweet where it was like, this is what I was thinking to myself when I was going through like all that hardship for that SEAL event. It's like, if you feel like you're hitting something hard, if those demons come forward, stop for a second, take a breath. 2, remember who the fuck you are. 3, decide who you want to be in this moment, not who you feel that you are. So if you feel like you're a failure, you're just going to continue to feed into that. But every moment we're different, every second. So like you said, even the person he was back then, there was this bad person, that person doesn't exist anymore. They're gone. The only person that we have is the one right in front of us now. So like when you saw him, you said the best 9 months of his life, because he was choosing over and over and over again. The courageous decision is to live like this, to make this my standard, to choose to go to the meetings, to choose to do the work, to choose to keep myself occupied so that I don't fall into that bad habit, literally. And then after you've made that decision on who you want to become, execute on it and then start over again. The thing is, all this stuff is simple, okay? But in the face of adversity, it becomes much more difficult. For him, the adversity was heroin. And we all have something that we're facing like that. And I'm not trying to say that heroin is easy to get off of. It's one of the most addictive chemicals, and it's beyond just a decision. There's like a biochemical addiction to it that your body has. But you have to be strong. And if nothing else, sometimes we have to be strong for the people around us. The way that we conduct ourselves in the face of adversity is an indication of how we will do everything else in our life. So when he makes that decision, when anybody makes a decision not to go back into the bottle or go back onto a drug, that will help them feed over into other areas of their life where they feel stronger. But it also goes the other direction. So sometimes if they feel that they're not doing great things in other areas of their life, that almost becomes the momentum that leads them down to, well, I feel like I'm a failure here, so I might as well just do this and lean into it. And the problem with relapse, as we know, is, like you say, sometimes it's deadly. So if I were to talk to him, I would say, man, first of all, give yourself fucking credit for what you've already done. Stop beating yourself up about the shit you can't change, and choose every moment to make the courageous decision. Seek out adversity and understand that sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, but the idea is to keep moving forward. And if we keep moving forward, we eventually get where we want to go. There are many paths to the top of the mountain, is what Miyamoto Musashi said. So as long as we have to endeavor forward towards the goal, it doesn't matter how I get there. In sports, they say they don't care how you win. They just want to know if you win. And that's the goal here. So if you have something that you're working towards, understand it will be hard. Understand there will be adversity, but adversity is the price we must pay for greatness. And if you're not willing to pay that price, then you're going to continually pay the price of mediocrity, which in my mind is not where anybody wants to be. I don't want you guys to get to a place in your life where you have the regrets. We all will have regrets. I'd rather you have regrets of stuff that you attempted and failed than just chose not to attempt at all because you had this idea that you want to be humble and that you don't need to try to do those things, because that's just, in my mind, glorified cowardice. There's something great in you. Fucking work towards that. Embrace that adversity, because it may be the thing that saves someone else's life if you're courageous enough to do that. Yeah.
All right. Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And yeah, stay up.